The stars were not kind here. They were distant, cold points of light in the black, offering no warmth. In the silence between them, the human cargo vessel Gyeongbok moved like a tired old traveler. Its hull was a patchwork of repaired metal plates, colored dull gray and brown. A faint trail of energy, blue and weak, flickered from its engines. Inside the ship, the air was warm and smelled of oil and recycled air. Captain Min sat in his chair on the bridge. He was a man with a calm face and steady hands. He looked at the main screen, which showed a massive shape ahead. It was the Tarelian dreadnought Judgment of Stars. It was huge, like a dark metal mountain covered in weapons and bright lights. Next to Min, So sat at the pilot station. Her fingers moved quickly over her controls, checking their ship's slow path. "They see us, Captain," So said. Her voice was clear and matter-of-fact. "Send the request," Min said quietly. "Standard docking plea. Medical supplies on board are time-sensitive." So sent the message. The words traveled across space. The Gyeongbok was carrying medicine for a human outpost on the other side of Waystation K7. The medicine would not last forever. They needed to get to the station soon to transfer the cargo to a faster ship. On the bridge of the Judgment of Stars, the Tarelian commander looked at the data on his screen. The Tarelians were tall, with thick gray skin and proud faces. The commander saw the small, ugly ship. He saw its low energy signature. He saw its human identification code. "Another human scrap heap," the commander said, not to anyone in particular. His second-in-command, standing nearby, made a sound of agreement. The Gyeongbok's request appeared on his screen. He read it and almost smiled, but it was not a kind smile. Back on the human ship, June, the young engineer, came onto the bridge. He had been checking the engine room. "How long until they let us pass?" he asked, wiping his hands on a cloth. "They will make us wait," So replied, not looking up. "They always do." A voice suddenly came through the speakers. It was deep and full of authority. It was the Tarelian commander. "Human vessel Gyeongbok," the voice said. "Your request for priority docking is denied. Your status does not qualify. Take your place in the queue behind the commercial freighters. Do not contact us again for special treatment." The message ended. On the screen, the huge dreadnought began to move away, heading for the beautiful, ring-shaped Waystation K7 that hung in the distance. The Gyeongbok was left alone. June's face grew red. "But the medicine. They scanned our cargo. They know it's important. Our outpost needs it." Captain Min did not get angry. He let out a long, slow breath. "They see the ship, June. They do not see the cargo. They see a human vessel, and that is all they need to know." "It's not fair," June said, his voice tight. "No," Min agreed, his voice still calm. "It is not. But anger is a fuel we cannot afford to burn right now. So plot us a course for the end of the queue. Let's be good guests." So nodded, and her hands moved over the controls. The Gyeongbok turned slowly, its weak engines pushing it toward the back of a long line of ships waiting to enter the station. There were sleek trader ships, bulky fuel carriers, all waiting their turn. The Gyeongbok looked small and poor among them. For a long time, they sat in silence. June stared at the Tarelian ship now docked with the station, its lights shining brightly. So monitored their systems, her mouth a thin line. Min watched the stars. Then, a soft beep came from June's engineering station. He looked down. His eyes widened. He checked the data again. "Captain," he said, his earlier anger gone, replaced by a new, more serious tone. "What is it, June?" "I'm reading a subspace tremor. Very faint, but the pattern, it's wrong." June brought the data up on the main screen. It showed lines of energy moving in a strange, twisting pattern. So looked at it. Her professional calm broke for a second. "That's a gravimetric shear precursor. A small one, but if it builds, it could rip a ship apart from the inside." June finished. He looked at Min. "It's on a path. It will pass right through this area, right where the station and the dreadnought are." Min leaned forward. His calm eyes were now sharp and focused. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be with our old sensors." June said. Min thought for only a second. Send the data. Send it to the Tarelian ship and to Waystation K7 Control. Full warning. Mark it urgent. June sent the data packet. They waited. Minutes ticked by. Space was silent. Finally, a response came from the Judgment of Stars. It was the same commander's voice, but now it sounded annoyed. Human vessel Gyeongbok, we have your so-called data. Our advanced sensors detect no such anomaly. This is a transparent attempt to jump the queue. Consider this your only warning. Any further communications will be seen as harassment. The channel closed. June slammed his fist on his console. They didn't even look. They just decided we were lying. On the huge Tarelian ship, a young science officer named Hannah sat at her station. She had seen the human data come in. She had run her own quiet analysis. The numbers worried her. The pattern was unusual, but it matched old theories about gravimetric events. She prepared a report for her commander, her heart beating fast. She delivered the report. The commander glanced at it, then at her. You are letting human panic infect your judgment, officer, he said. Their technology is primitive. Their data is noise. Dismissed. Hannah returned to her station, her face feeling hot. She looked at the human ship on her scanner, a tiny speck of light. She looked at her data again, and she was afraid. The silence on the bridge of the Gyeongbok was heavy. The Tarelian commander's final words seemed to hang in the air. June stared at his blank screen, his hands clenched. The disbelief was a cold stone in his stomach. They had seen the data. They had chosen not to believe it. Captain Min did not speak. He simply watched the main viewer, his eyes on the distant shape of Waystation K7 and the powerful Tarelian ship attached to it. His face was like a calm pool of water, showing nothing of what moved beneath the surface. What do we do? So asked, her voice low. She was already running new calculations on her pilot's console, her fingers moving with a quiet urgency. We prepare, Min said. His voice was steady. June, I want a full diagnostic on the inertial dampeners. Priority 1. So, plot me 3 low-energy escape vectors. Use the gravitational pull of the local debris field for cover, but keep them gentle. No burns. The orders were simple. They were not the orders of a panicked crew. They were the steps of a procedure. June pushed his anger down. He had a job to do. He turned to his station and began the diagnostic. As he worked, he muttered to himself, "They think our sensors are junk. They think we're making it up to cut in line." He shook his head, focusing on the flow of power to the ship's stability systems. On the Tarelian dreadnought, life continued as normal. The commander felt a mild satisfaction. He had put those humans in their place. The idea that a battered cargo ship could detect a danger his own ship could not see was ridiculous. It was an insult to Tarelian engineering that in a small, dimly lit science lab deep in the ship, Officer Hannah could not let it go. The human data packet was open on her main screen. Next to it, she had her own sensor logs. They did not show the shear directly. Not yet, but they showed the echoes of it. Ripples in subspace energy that were all wrong. Her superior had dismissed it as background noise from the station's reactors. But Hannah had studied gravitational theory. She knew what the precursors looked like. This was a match, a slow-building, catastrophic match. She ran another simulation, feeding the human data into the Tarelian predictive model. The result made her blood run cold. If the tremor built into a full gravimetric shear, it would pass directly through the sector where the station and the dreadnought were parked. The effect would be asymmetrical. It would stress different parts of a ship in different ways. For a vessel as large and complex as the Judgment of Stars, with its powerful engines and dense hull, it would be like twisting a metal bar until it snapped. She stood up. She had to tell someone. She could not go to the commander again. He would only punish her. But perhaps the chief of station security? Or the head of engineering? She left her lab and walked quickly through the bright, clean corridors of the ship. She passed other Tarelians going about their duties. No one looked worried. She heard chatter about shore leave on the station, about the quality of the food in the commissary. A joke was being told about the panicking human mice in their rust can. Hannah's steps slowed. Her certainty began to waver under the weight of their normalcy. Was she wrong? Was she, as the commander said, letting human panic infect her? She was just a junior officer. What did she know? She reached the door to the chief engineer's office. Her hand hovered near the entry chime. She thought of the human ship, sitting patiently at the back of the queue. She thought of their data, clean and simple in its warning. They had nothing to gain by lying. They were already at the back of the line. She pressed the chime. Inside, the chief engineer was busy. He was a large, older Tarelian with tired eyes. "Yes, officer? Make it quick." Hannah stepped in. "Sir, I have a concern about a potential gravimetric event. The human vessel detected a precursor, and my analysis suggests—" The chief engineer held up a hand, stopping her. "The human data," he said, his voice flat. "The commander already addressed this. Their sensors are inferior. They are not calibrated to our standards. You are wasting your time, and now you are wasting mine." "But, sir, the predictive model shows a high probability of—" "The model is only as good as the data you feed it," the engineer interrupted. "Garbage in, garbage out. That is a basic rule of science, officer. Do not use alien garbage to scare the crew." Dismissed. Hannah felt her face grow hot again. She left the office, the door sliding shut behind her with a quiet, final sound. She stood in the corridor, feeling utterly alone. She looked down at her datapad, the warning flashing silently. Back on the Gyeongbok, the crew was ready. June reported the dampeners were at 100%. So had 3 smooth, careful courses plotted. The ship was as prepared as it could be. Min looked at the countdown June had estimated. The shear would arrive in less than 30 minutes. He opened a channel not to the Tyrilians, but to the Waystation K-7 traffic control. It was a general hail. "Waystation K-7, this is the independent cargo vessel Gyeongbok. We are reiterating our warning of a Class 2 gravimetric shear approaching your position. Estimated arrival in 27 minutes. Recommend you secure all external docks and prepare for spatial instability. Please acknowledge." They waited. The seconds ticked by. Finally, a board-sounding station controller replied. "Gyeongbok, your transmission is noted. No anomalous readings on our scopes. Maintain your position in the queue and cease non-essential broadcasts." The channel closed. So let out a slow breath. June just shook his head, all his anger gone, replaced by a sad kind of understanding. Min leaned back in his chair. He looked at his crew. "Secure yourselves," he said quietly. "It seems we will be riding this out alone." On the Tarelian ship, Hannah sat back down at her station in the empty lab. She watched her screens. The ripple was getting stronger. It was no longer just an echo. It was a clear, rising signal. The human data had been right. It had been right all along. She looked at the comm panel. She could send a direct, priority alert to the station and the bridge. It would be against orders. It would likely end her career. She watched the signal grow stronger. She thought about the humans who had tried to warn them twice. She thought about the hundreds of lives on the station and the ship. Her hand moved toward the controls. It was shaking. The quiet on the Gyeongbok was not the quiet of fear. It was the quiet of a machine ready to work. The final warning had been sent and ignored. Now there was only the task ahead. Captain Min looked at So and June. "Standard Drill 7, he said. His voice calm, and even no one questioned it. So nodded, her hands already moving. On her screen, the 3 gentle escape routes were replaced by a single, more complex pattern. It was a flow of small movements, a dance of minimal thrust. June turned away from the comms panel he had been staring at. His face was set. He turned to his engineering board and began shutting down systems. First, the main cargo bay lights went dark. Then, the non-essential life support in the unused crew quarters. The artificial gravity in the corridors lowered to a slight pull. Every watt of power was being carefully gathered and sent to only a few places: the structural integrity field, the inertial dampeners, and the low-power maneuvering thrusters, the ship grew still and dark. The only bright lights were on the bridge. The hum of the engines faded to a whisper. From the outside, the Gyeongbok now looked completely dead, a piece of harmless driftwood in the stream of space. On the Tarelian dreadnought, the mood was different. In the main dining hall, officers sat together for their meal. The news of the human panic had spread. It was a funny story. I heard they were screaming about space ghosts, one weapons officer said, taking a bite of his food. Their ship is so old, it probably shakes when they think too hard. Another laughed. Commander Kale, who had denied the human request, sat at the head table. He listened to the chatter with a small smile. He saw it as a sign of good morale. His crew was confident. They trusted their technology and their judgment. The humans were a distant joke, already forgotten. The station outside the viewport shone brightly, a beacon of order and Tarelian influence. Everything was under control in her silent lab. Hannah was breaking into a cold sweat. Her screen was now flashing a solid, urgent orange. The gravimetric anomaly was no longer a maybe. It was a certainty. Its predicted path was a line of destructive energy, and the Tarelian ship was sitting right in the middle of it. Her hand hovered over the ship-wide alarm. To press it would be to say the commander was wrong. To press it would be to trust the humans over her own leadership. She saw the faces of her fellow officers laughing in the commissary. She heard the commander's dismissive voice. Her finger trembled. She thought of the physics. The shear would not hit like an explosion. It would be a twisting force. The bigger the ship, the more mass it had, the more stress it would feel. The judgment of stars was the biggest, most massive object for miles. It was a perfect target. She pressed the alarm that a loud, sharp sound echoed through the corridors of the dreadnought. The laughter in the dining hall stopped. Officers looked up, confused. Commander Kale frowned. Standing up on the bridge, an officer called out, "Sir, we have a priority alert from Science Lab 4. Officer Hannah is reporting the gravimetric event is confirmed. Impact in 4 minutes." The commander's face darkened. Anger flashed in his eyes. That junior officer is spreading panic based on human misinformation. Silence that alarm. Confine her to quarters. He turned to his crew. "There is no event. Our sensors remain clear. This is a failure of discipline, nothing more." The alarm was cut off. The sudden silence felt heavy. The crew looked at each other, unsure. They trusted their commander. But the alarm had been so loud. Back on the Gyeongbok, June saw the brief, frantic signal from the Tarelian ship before it was cut off. "Someone over there believed us," he said quietly. "It doesn't matter now," So replied, her eyes fixed on her controls. "Hold on. It's starting." The first sign was not something you could see. It was something you felt. A deep, low vibration, like the lowest note of a huge bell, traveled through the fabric of space itself. The stars outside the viewport did not shake. Instead, they seemed to stretch, for just a second, into tiny lines of light. On way station K7. The effect was immediate and chaotic. The station's graceful spin, which created its artificial gravity, met the twisting force of the shear. The two forces fought. The result was a violent, shuddering lurch. Across the station, lights flickered and died. Sirens wailed. Objects not secured flew through the air. A deep groan of straining metal echoed through the halls. But it was the Tarelian ship that suffered most. The judgment of stars was built for power, for imposing its will. It was not built for this. The shear wrapped around its massive hull. The stress was not even. The front of the ship twisted a fraction of a degree more than the back. Deep inside the ship, supports and beams, designed to handle direct weapon hits, screamed under this strange internal pressure. Conduits burst, spraying coolant. Main power struggled and then failed in entire sections, plunging decks into darkness and panic. The proud ship, a moment ago a symbol of absolute control, was suddenly blind, crippled, and adrift. Inside the dead-looking Gyeongbok, the crew felt the wave pass over them. The ship shuddered, but it was a gentle roll, like a boat on a slow swell. The powerful dampeners June had tuned hummed softly, absorbing the worst of the forces. So's hands were steady on the thrusters, making tiny, precise adjustments, letting the ship move with the current of twisted space, not against it. Min watched the main viewer. It showed the Tarelian ship, its lights flashing erratically, then going dark. It showed the station, with small explosions of gas and debris puffing from its side. He watched the destruction in silence. The choice had been made. The galaxy had chosen not to listen. Now it was reaping the consequences. And his ship, the small, ugly, dismissed human ship, was the only thing still moving calmly in the chaos. For a moment, there was only the hum of the Gyeongbok systems. The violent shuddering of space was over. The gravimetric shear had passed, twisting its way out into the void, leaving behind a silent, broken field. The main viewer showed the new reality. Waystation K7 was dark along one entire ring. Emergency lights flashed like red and white fireflies against the black. A steady stream of white gas and small debris trailed from a gash in its side. The station was wounded, spinning slightly off its axis. But the true scale of the damage was the Tarelian dreadnought. The judgment of stars was a shadow of itself. All its proud running lights were dead. Its smooth, intimidating shape was now broken. A jagged crack ran along its central spine, and flickers of orange flame could be seen deep inside. It was turning slowly, uncontrolled. A great beast felled by an unseen force. On the Gyeongbok's bridge, the crew saw it all. June let out a slow breath. "Stars," he whispered. His anger from before was completely gone, washed away by a cold wave of shock. The Tarelians had been arrogant, but no one deserved this. So was already scanning. Multiple hull breaches on the dreadnought. Life support is failing on their lower decks. The station has lost main power and primary gravity. Their comms are a mess of distress calls. Her voice was pure focus, reporting facts, pushing emotion aside. Captain Min watched the destruction. His face was still, his eyes taking in every detail. He saw the Tarelian ship's engines, dark and cold. He saw the station's docking arms, one of them broken and hanging loose. He did not smile. He did not look satisfied. He looked like a man seeing a great and terrible waste. "Are we intact?" Min asked, his voice quiet in the silent bridge. June checked his board. All systems green. Dampeners held. No damage. We're perfectly fine. It was the truth. Their little ship, which everyone had ignored and mocked, was untouched. It floated calmly in the middle of the wreckage, on the Tarelian dreadnought. It was a scene of chaos and terror. The lights were out. The only illumination came from flashing emergency panels and the ugly glow of electrical fires. The air was getting thin and cold. Alarm sounds echoed, but there was no centralized voice giving orders. The command bridge was in ruins, consoles shattered from the internal stress. Commander Kale pulled himself up from the floor. His head was bleeding. He looked at his broken screens, at the darkness, and heard the panic over the local comms. His mind, trained for battle, struggled to understand. No enemy had fired. No weapon had hit them. The human warning, it had been real. The knowledge was a physical pain, worse than his injuries that I in a dark science lab. Hannah picked herself up. Her console was dead, but a small, battery-powered backup scanner was still working. She turned it on and pointed it at the field. It showed the broken station. It showed her own dying ship. And it showed one small, steady energy signature right in the middle of it all. The human cargo vessel. Its power signature was not the weak, flickering thing it had been before. It was calm, strong, and stable. Her heart pounded. They were alive. They were not just alive. They were operational. How? Back on the Gyeongbok, Min finally moved. He turned to So. "Open a channel. Broadcast on all common emergency frequencies." So nodded. "Channel open." Min leaned slightly toward the comm. His voice, when he spoke, was clear. It was calm. There was no "I told you so." There was no triumph. It was the simple, direct voice of a professional. Way Station K7, Tarelian Vessel Judgment of Stars. This is Captain Min of the independent vessel Gyeongbok. We are reading multiple critical injuries and systems failures. We are positioned in your vicinity and are fully operational. Our medical bay is available. We have fabricators for emergency hull seals and life support parts. We are standing by to render assistance. Please advise your status and needs. He finished speaking. The message went out into the silent, wounded space. On the broken bridge of the dreadnought, Commander Kale heard it. The human voice was like a slap. It was calm, capable, and utterly shameful. Help was being offered by the very people he had scorned. His pride screamed at him to refuse, to die with his ship rather than accept pity from a human. But then a voice, weak with pain, came over his local comm. It was from the engineering deck. Commander, we are losing atmosphere on C and D decks. We have many wounded. We cannot stabilize the core breach without external power. Please. The commander closed his eyes. He saw the faces of his crew. He saw Hannah, the junior officer who had tried to warn him. He was their commander. His choices had led to this. His pride was not worth their lives. He opened his eyes. They were full of defeat. He reached for the broken comm panel, found a working button, and pressed it. His voice, when it came, was rough and cracked. It was a whisper filled with agony. Human vessel, this is Commander Kale of the Judgment of Stars. We require assistance, medical, and power. Every word tasted like ash. The message was received. On the Gyeongbok, the 3 crew members heard it. June looked at Min, waiting. Captain Min simply nodded. So, plot a docking course with the Tarelian ship. June, prepare the medical bay and the emergency fabricators. Use the standard cross-species protocols. The orders were given. The human ship, small and steady, began to move toward the giant, broken dreadnought. It was not a victory march. It was a quiet mission of mercy, heading toward those who had chosen their own fate, and now had to live with it. The Gyeongbok moved. It did not rush. Its thrusters pushed it forward with a smooth, gentle motion. The journey to the crippled dreadnought was short, but in the silence it felt very long. On the bridge, so guided them with small, precise burns. Her eyes were on the scanner, avoiding the huge, ugly crack in the Tarelian ship's side. June was not on the bridge. He was in the main airlock corridor, pulling out equipment. He opened storage lockers that were not marked on any standard cargo manifest. Inside were sleek, advanced medical kits and compact fabricator units that hummed with quiet power. Captain Min watched the Tarelian ship grow larger on the viewer. He saw the details of the damage now. The twisted metal. The frozen escape pods that had failed to launch. It was a tomb for many, but not for all. Inside the Judgment of Stars, there was darkness and fear. Commander Kale had made his way to a secondary control room. The air was cold. Around him, injured crew members groaned or sat in silent shock. The human's offer echoed in his head, a constant reminder of his failure. He watched on a cracked screen as the small, blocky human vessel approached. It looked so simple, so harmless. A wave of bitter confusion washed over him. How had this fragile thing survived when his mighty ship had not? The Gyeongbok slowed to a stop alongside the dreadnought's main dorsal airlock bank. One airlock door on the massive ship was intact. From the human vessel, a flexible docking tube extended. It moved with a smooth, automated grace that seemed wrong for such an old ship. The end of the tube connected to the Tarelian airlock with a soft clunk and a hiss of equalizing pressure. The seal was perfect on the Tarelian side. A few surviving crew members in emergency suits stared. The connection light above their door turned from red to green. The human ship had docked on the first try, as if it knew their systems better than they did. The inner door of the Gyeongbok opened. June stood there, dressed in a simple gray jumpsuit. He was not wearing a heavy environment suit, only a small breather mask. He pushed a floating anti-grav gurney ahead of him, loaded with supplies. His face was serious, his eyes scanning the dark, damaged corridor ahead. "Identify yourselves," a Tarelian officer barked, his voice shaky. He pointed a sidearm at June. June did not flinch. I am Engineer June from the Gyeongbok. I have medical supplies and mobile power units. My captain said you have wounded. Where are they? The Tarelian officer just stared, his weapon lowering slightly. The reality was too strange. This young human, looking more like a mechanic than a soldier, was standing calmly in their broken ship. Asking a practical question from down the corridor, another figure appeared. It was Hannah. Her uniform was torn, and she had a cut on her forehead. She pushed past the officer. I'll show you, she said to June. Her voice was tired but clear. Follow me. She led him to a large room that had been a briefing area. Now it was a makeshift medical bay. Dozens of wounded Turelians lay on the floor. The scene was one of pain and low moans. A few medical crew worked frantically with dwindling supplies. June did not pause. He opened his first kit. He took out a device that looked like a flat scanner. He knelt by the nearest wounded soldier, whose leg was bent at a terrible angle. June ran the scanner over the injury. A soft blue light washed over the Turelian's leg. The device beeped, and a readout appeared in June's hand. Compound fracture. Internal bleeding. Standard Tarelian physiology. June murmured, as if reading a grocery list. He pulled a hypospray from his kit, dialed in a setting, and pressed it to the soldier's neck. The Turelian's pained gasp slowed. His body relaxed. June then took a small, pen-like tool and pointed it at the leg. A precise, amber light emerged, holding the bone in place. He wrapped it in a smart bandage that immediately tightened to the perfect pressure. Hannah watched, her scientific mind overriding her shock. The tools were not alien. They were not strange. They were just better. Far better than anything on her ship. The scanner had identified the species and injury instantly. The bone stabilizer was technology she had only read about in theoretical papers. Who are you? Hannah whispered, not meaning to speak aloud. June looked up, moving to the next patient. We're the ones who tried to warn you, he said simply. He did not say more. Back in the docking corridor, So had come across, carrying a heavy power core unit. She walked up to the stunned Tarelian officer. Your main reactor is in emergency shutdown. This will give you back basic lights and life support on this deck. Where is your primary power conduit junction? The officer pointed numbly down the hall. So nodded and walked off, her steps confident, as if she had a map of the ship in her head up in the secondary control. Commander Kale watched all this on flickering security feeds. He saw the human woman installing the power core. He saw the young human man working medical miracles. He saw his own crew, the proud warriors of the Tarelian ascendancy, being saved by the people they had called weak. Then his eyes fixed on the feed from the docking tube itself. It showed the outside of the human ship, now connected to his own. As the human systems interfaced with his broken ones, his own scanners received a burst of data. Diagnostic information from the Gyeongbok. His screen flickered. A new readout appeared. It was an analysis of the human vessel's power source. Before the shear, it had read as a simple, low-output fusion reactor. Now, with systems linked, the truth was revealed. The readout flashed symbols he did not understand at first. Then his computer translated. The core was a gravity drive prototype, a theoretical engine that bent space itself. It was not for going fast. It was for surviving things like gravimetric shears. The scars on the hull were not from wear. They were a skin of adaptive quantum plating, designed to absorb and deflect spatial energy. The human ship was not a cargo vessel. It was a fortress, a silent, watching fortress disguised as nothing. Commander Kale sank into his chair. The final piece of understanding crushed him. They had not dismissed a weak ship. They had dismissed a predator who chose not to show its teeth. Their fate had not been decided by human anger, but by their own choice to sneer at the offered hand. And now, that same hand was stitching their wounds and giving them light, showing them the true cost of their pride. The air in the Tarelian secondary control was cold and smelled of burnt wiring. Commander Kale could not look away from the screen. The words gravity drive prototype glowed there, a silent accusation. He felt a hollowness in his chest, a void where his pride had been around him. The lights flickered, then steadied into a soft, steady glow. Power was returning. The human woman, had connected their unit. Basic life support whispered back to life, and the biting cold began to retreat. It was a mercy. It felt like a judgment. He stood up. His body ached. He had to go down there. He had to see. The corridors were still a mess, but now there was light to see the damage. Wires hung from the ceilings. Broken panels lay on the floor. As he walked, he passed his crew. He saw them sitting up, their wounds sealed with clean, white bandages that seemed to glow slightly. He saw them drinking water from human ration packs. No one looked at him. He reached the makeshift medical bay. The scene was orderly now. The moans of pain had mostly stopped. The human, June, was finishing with a patient, his movements efficient and calm. Hannah was beside him, handing him tools when he asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. Cale stood in the doorway. He watched as June placed a small device on a wounded officer's chest. The device hummed, and a display showed the Tyrellian's heart rhythm stabilizing. It was technology far beyond their own mobile med units. June looked up and saw him. The young human's face showed no anger, no satisfaction. It was just neutral, professional. He gave a small nod and then turned back to his work. Hannah noticed the commander. She walked over to him, her steps slow. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet. "Officer Hannah," Cale said. His own voice sounded strange to him. "You tried to warn me." "Yes, sir." He nodded, unable to say more. His eyes were drawn to the main docking corridor. Captain Min was there now. The human captain had crossed over from his ship. He stood in the center of the corridor, not in a uniform, but in simple, dark clothes. He was looking at a damaged power conduit, his hands behind his back. He looked like a visitor inspecting a broken machine, not a conqueror surveying a victory. Cale walked towards him. Every step was heavy. The surviving Tyrellian crew in the corridor moved aside, their eyes on the floor. The silence was thick. He stopped a few feet from Captain Min. Min turned to face him. The human's face was calm, his eyes quiet. He waited. Commander Cale had prepared words. Apologies, excuses, justifications. They all died in his throat. They were stones, and he could not lift them. What could he say? "I'm sorry, I didn't believe your lie about your ship." That was not the truth. The truth was worse. So he asked the only question that mattered. His voice was a rough whisper. "Why?" He did not explain the question. He didn't need to. Why help us? Why show us this? Why not let us die in our ignorance? Captain Min considered him for a moment. He looked past Cale, at the wounded being cared for, at the faces of the Tyrellian crew filled with shame and confusion. "You asked for assistance," Min said simply. "We had the means to give it." "That's not what I mean," Cale said, a flash of his old frustration rising, but it was weak and died instantly. "Your ship, what it is. You could have left. You could have watched us die. It would have been what we deserved." Min was silent for a long time. He looked at the cracked wall, the symbol of the Tyrellian ascendancy partly scraped away. "On my world," Min said slowly, "there is an old saying. The test of a person is not their strength, but what they choose to protect with it. We have strength. You have now seen a small piece of it. The choice was never about letting you die. It was about what we would do after you made your choice." He turned his gaze back to Cale. "You chose not to listen. You chose to judge us as weak. That was your test. And you failed. Our test was different. It was this moment, right now. The galaxy is not a kind place. It is full of shears and storms and darkness. Our choice is to be another storm or to be a harbor. Even for those who would have passed us by." He gestured towards June and the medical bay. "Your people are alive. Your ship can be repaired. The station will survive. That is the answer to your why. Because today you determined your fate by your choices. We are determining ours." Min then did something unexpected. He gave a small, slight bow of his head. Not a bow of submission, a bow of acknowledgement, of a transaction completed. I will return to my ship, Min said. Engineer June will stay until your own medics are stabilized. We have transferred power and basic repair protocols to your systems. You are no longer in immediate danger. He began to walk back towards the docking tube. He did not look back. Commander Kale stood frozen. The words settled over him. You determined your fate. We are determining ours. The humans were not saving them out of kindness. They were doing it as a statement, a demonstration of what they were, and what the Tyrellians were not. He watched Captain Min's back as he entered the tube. The human had not asked for thanks. He had not asked for surrender. He had simply done what he decided was right, according to a code Kale could barely understand. The galaxy had not changed in the last hour, but Commander Kale's understanding of it had shattered. The strongest power he had ever encountered had not revealed itself with weapons, but with bandages and a power cell. And it had left him with the crushing weight of his own failure and the haunting question of what his people would do with this terrible, quiet lesson. The docking tube detached with a soft hiss. The Gyeongbok pulled away from the scarred hull of the Tyrellian ship, its movement smooth and silent. Behind it, the dreadnought Judgment of Stars was no longer dark. A grid of emergency lights now shone from its intact sections, a fragile heartbeat in the void. The station, K7, still trailed its plume of gas, but the frantic distress calls had ceased, replaced by the orderly, if shaken, chatter of damage control on the bridge of the human ship. Everything was quiet. So guided them away from the wreckage on a gentle course back towards the normal space lanes. June had returned from the Tyrellian ship just minutes before. He sat at his engineering station running a final systems check. He said nothing about what he had seen over there. Captain Min sat in his chair, watching the stars on the main viewer. They were steady points of light again, the strange twisting of the sheer long gone. His face was tired, but peaceful. The work was done. In the secondary control room of the Tyrellian ship, Commander Kale sat in the same chair. He had not moved. The screens before him showed the retreating shape of the Gyeongbok. It looked exactly as it had when it first arrived. A small, battered, unremarkable cargo vessel. He knew the truth now. That knowledge was a heavy cloak on his shoulders. Officer Hannah entered the room. She had cleaned the cut on her forehead. She stood at attention, waiting. Report, Kale said, his voice hollow. The wounded are stable, sir, Hannah said. The human medical protocols are integrated into our systems. They are remarkably effective. Our engineers report that the temporary power from the human unit will last until we can restart our own auxiliary reactor. They also left repair schematics for the hull breaches. The alloys suggested are unfamiliar, but the design is flawless. She paused, then added the final piece. The human engineer, June, said to tell you. The beacon is set. Your path home is clear. Kale understood. The humans had not just given them power and medicine. They had charted a safe gravitational route out of the debris field, a path their crippled ship could follow. Did he? Kale began, then stopped. Did he say anything else? Hannah shook her head. No, sir. He just packed his tools, nodded, and left. He was very polite. Polite. The word was like a needle. They had been polite when asking to dock. They had been polite when giving their warning. They had been polite when saving lives. It was a politeness that came from a place of such absolute certainty that it needed no anger, no shouting. It was the most frightening thing Kale had ever encountered. Thank you, officer, he said finally. You are dismissed. Hannah turned to go, but she hesitated at the door. She looked back. Sir? What do we do now? Kale looked at her. She was young. She had seen the truth before anyone else. She had tried. He thought of Captain Min's words. The galaxy is not a kind place. We go home, Kale said, the weight of every word immense. We file our reports. We tell them what happened. We tell them about the human ship. We tell them that our choices determined our fate, and that the humans are watching what we choose next. Hannah nodded slowly. She understood. The lesson was not over. It had only just begun. Out in the deep quiet, the Gyeongbok reached the edge of the affected zone. So engaged the standard fusion drives. The familiar, weak blue glow returned to its engines. Course is set for the next waypoint, Captain. So said. Thank you, Min replied. June finally spoke, his eyes on his console. The gravity drive core is powered down and recloaked. Adaptive plating is back to standard thermal profile. We look like a heap of junk again. He almost smiled. That is the idea, Min said. For a while, they traveled in comfortable silence. The event was behind them. They had done their job. Will they learn? June asked, looking out at the stars. The Tyrellians? The whole galactic commons. Min leaned back. Some will, he said. Some will hear the report and call it a lie. Some will be angry. Some will be afraid. That is not our concern. What is our concern? So asked. Our concern, Min said, his voice quiet and firm, is to continue, to watch, to be the harbor in the next storm, for whoever needs it. To let the galaxy keep making its choices. One day, enough may choose to look past the rust and see the strength. Or they may not. Our purpose remains the same. On the viewer, the wreckage of the Judgment of Stars and Waystation K7 shrank to a tiny cluster of lights, then disappeared into the dark. Ahead was the empty, star-dusted highway. The Gyeongbok, a simple human vessel, moved on. Its crew did not celebrate. They did not mourn. They had unmasked themselves for a moment, not to rule, but to teach. They had shown that real strength was not in what you could destroy, but in what you were willing to save. The galaxy had seen and realized too late. The humans had known all along. And now, they returned to the shadows, leaving behind a lesson, a repaired ship, and a future that was forever changed by a simple, terrible, and merciful truth.